Shalom, everyone. Because of the importance of the Amida service and how it's related to our daily routine, there's going to be a lot of nitty-bitty details about what the right time is, and based on life, based on other examples, based on um, questions that we have from very early in history. So when it says the first time that somebody prayed, it was Abraham, our forefather Abraham. He prayed for the welfare of the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. He asked Hashem, starting with 50, going down to 10, if Hashem will not forgive the city if there aren't enough righteous people, to save the cities. But we don't know exactly what time that was, because his morning started much earlier when he welcomed the three angels, and they were talking about Sarah having a child. And after all this, it says, Vashem Avraham odenu omed lifnei Hashem. That's where we get the word Amidah, that he's still standing before Hashem. He might have sat down with the angels, but according to the simple verses, it says that he stood over them when and serving them, and he didn't sit down with them. And so that's how we learn what proper Amida is of the morning. But it definitely wasn't at sunrise or earlier at dawn. So because that's the example, and then Mincha was officially suggested by Isaac, and then Marv by Jacob. So that's why we'll go through all these different times in order to understand better. But in chapter 18, we will get to making up if we mistakenly didn't pray on time, or if we prayed the wrong prayer. And just to explain why that is, because the other source for us praying in the morning is because the Torah tells us that we must bring the Tamid offering, the eternal offering of two sheep every day, one in the morning and one in the late afternoon. So during the time of the Beit HaMikdash, during the time of the temple, when the Kohanim were told to bring the Tamid as early as possible. So like I said yesterday, they first had to clean off the altar, and they had to wash their hands and feet, etc. But that didn't take that long, apparently, and they would do it as close as possible to the sunrise. So that's the source for this specific halacha, and we'll also go into the next one because they're both very short. So lechatchila, a person should not recite the Amida before Vatikin, because according to a number of poskim are halachic authorities, the time to pray lechatchila begins at Netzach Hama, at sunrise, and lasts 4 hours, like we saw yesterday. The ideal time to pray the Amidah is immediately at the start of Vatikin, just as the devoted ones prayed. Therefore, it seems that if a person whose prayer lasts approximately 25 minutes from the beginning until the Amidah, and this is just, I guess, an average. We mentioned yesterday that the Mishnah Berurah says that it should take a half hour just for Psuke. So this is, I guess, more lenient, that it takes 25 minutes. The earliest time he may begin to pray is 25 minutes before nights. One who must be on his way or must start work earlier is permitted to begin praying from the time of Mishiakir, of recognizing either his friend or defining between light blue and white, since by then a little light has spread over the earth, and that moment is the valid time for the recital of Shema and for the mitzvah of tzitzit and tefillin. We have already learned that the time of Mishiakir is approximately 50 minutes before Netz, and one last leniency in a very severe or extreme circumstances, which will lead us into the next paragraph. One who needs to pray even earlier should begin his prayer without talit and tefillin and proceed until the conclusion of Pesukei Zimra. When he finishes Yishtabach, which is the last, the second bracha at the end of Pesukei Zimra, he must wait for the time of Mishiakir and only then put on his talit and tefillin and continue praying. Just to clarify, if a person starts before Amud Shachar, it's as if he prayed Mariv. You can't mix the two. And I think at the very beginning I told a story about how my father went into a shtibel, and it was, I think, 3 o'clock in the morning. Not sure the exact time, but the person at the entrance asked him if he was there for Shachris, Mincha, or Mariv. And Mariv makes a little bit sense. Shachrit even less, and Mincha definitely not. There is nobody in the world who allows you to daven Mincha at 3 o'clock in the morning. So it's just ridiculous, because you can't bring two tamids and then take the rest of the day off. It had to be according to this order, that there was the morning one and the afternoon one, and in between there was other business that had to be dealt with in the temple, and Merai Bana Mikdash will be able to experience all that. So let's go into the next paragraph, which is how early is one permitted to pray in extenuating circumstances. And so let's say that you must go to work, and on the way you will not be able to concentrate. Let's say that, for example, that your work starts at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then there's no way in the world, if that is before Amud Shachar, that you're allowed to pray. But we are a little bit more flexible about calculating the Alot Shachar, because if you remember, we said that it's an average of somewhere between 72 and 90 minutes, depending on the season of the year. So in the case of extenuating circumstances, one may recite Birkot Kriyat Shema from the time of Amud Shachar, which is 72 minutes before sunrise in the months of Nisan and Tishrei. However, as long as it is possible to recite Birkot Kriyat Shema after the time of Mishiakir, one may not recite them from Amud Shachar, meaning that if you have the ability to wait a little bit and not start at dawn, then you shouldn't. For instance, if someone who is traveling can pray while walking or sitting, as his friend drives, or on a train, like I gave an example for my friend, or on a plane, he must wait for the time of Mishiakir and only then recite Birkot Kriyat Shema and recite the Amida while walking or sitting. So we are more lenient with sitting for Amida than we are of praying it before Amud Shachar, because we are basically praying in the wrong time. So it's calling something what it isn't. So if he is able to recite Birkot Kriyat Shema while he is traveling after the time of Mishiakir, but cannot recite the Amida while traveling, he should pray the Amida earlier after Amud Shachar and recite Birkot Kriyat Shema and Shema while traveling, even though he will not merit connecting redemption to prayer. So Birkat Gal Israel, which ends before the Amida, the morning and the evening, that's what this is, the idea of the merit, this extra merit for doing so. And so again, we're allowed to sit. And if you remember, I gave you the example of Ole Beilan, which is in the Talmud, where it says that if somebody works for a farmer and is picking fruit on a tree, and they're allowed to say Kriyat Shema on the tree without fearing of losing concentration, but they have to get permission to come down from the tree in order to say the Amida before the time passes. And of course, I'm sure that today, with all the social allowances, I think that if you have a good relationship with your employer, there's definitely going to be allowances for such things. You're not taking a smoke break, you're taking a prayer break. And I think that will be respected if you ask nicely and if you explain why it's so important. And all the way at the end of the day, which is, we're still 4 or 5 chapters away from that, and at the end of the day, I saw people pulling over and standing beside the highway, coming out of their car and reciting the Amida because the sun was already setting. And so that's just another example of how to combine these two and to make sure that you plan your day properly and do things properly. So when it is not possible to recite Birkot Kriyat Shema while traveling, as for example, if he does not know Birkot Kriyat Shema by heart, and it is not possible for him to use a Siddur, he may pray earlier, since such situations are considered extenuating circumstances. Again, only once in a while. We talked about once in 30 days yesterday. He recites Birkot HaShachar, Korbanot, and Psukei Hazimra before Amud Shachar. And when the time of Amud Shachar arises, when dawn comes, he puts on his talit and tefillin without a bracha, recites Kriyat Shema and its brachot, and prays the Amidah. When he finishes the Amidah, the time of Mishiakir will have already arrived, and at that point he takes hold of his tzitzit and tefillin and recites the blessings upon them. According to the Ashkenazi minhag, Birkat Yotzer HaMeorot may not be recited before the time of Mishiakir either. Rather, one must delay its recital until after praying Amidah. So basically what he's suggesting is to skip these blessings and to say the Shema with proper kavanah, with intention, like we learned about at the very beginning of this course. And so that's the way to do it in order for it to be in the right time. There's also something else that you didn't mention, which is if there's a bad smell. So on some of the trains that I've been in Israel especially, but also in other places, sometimes the smell of the oils or maybe it's from the bathroom, I'm not sure. It's just not possible to pray with kavanah in those situations. So again, you should, if you're going to go on a train, you should do this shortened version as long as you do it after dawn. And we'll end with that.